There used to be a term that was very popular in the 80s. You don't hear it that much anymore, but it was called management by wandering around. In the fact that everybody, when they get promoted or they become, get a job of, they have a tendency to get what I call the three-piece suit syndrome. They put on a three-piece suit, they start dressing nicer, they start thinking they're smarter, and they don't realize that what got them there is usually their people skills, and what is going to get them to the next level, what are the people who work for them. When I had my office in Hong Kong, my partner in Hong Kong had a sign on his wall that said, "If you're not having fun and you're not making money, what are you doing here?" We're supposed to be making money, and we're supposed to be having a little bit of fun while we do it.
What happens when a young sales agent becomes the youngest person hired in company history and then goes on to run a global operation before he's 30? In this episode of The One Away Show, Brad shares the unlikely journey that took him from campus bars to corporate boardrooms in Hong Kong. Brad unpacks the formative power of hands-on sales, the early influence of family entrepreneurship, and the leadership lessons that fueled decades of success across industries, from gift wrap distribution to plumbing supplies. With disarming candor, Brad opens up about building profit-sharing companies, transforming operations, and why moving hurdles for others became the philosophy for leading. It's a conversation full of grounded wisdom and operational gold. Let's get into it. Brad, welcome to the One Away Show.
Brian, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for being here. It's great to have you. So, Brad, really enjoyed our first chat and excited to do this. What is the one away moment that you want to share with us today?
There were a lot of times in my life that I was the youngest person to do something. And at the age of 30, I was offered to be president of a company by a group of venture capitalists, private investors here in San Diego. And they told me I was going to run a bow company. When they first said a bow company, I thought bows and arrows, or light bulbs. I didn't know if I heard it correct. But it ended up being ribbons and bows. And so I was given the opportunity to run a company in an industry completely different than what I had been in. But we were importers and exporters of gift wrapping products, ribbons, bows, paper products, and we're OEM manufacturers in China that made products for Hallmark and American Greetings. And so I go from, just being a young man living in San Diego, who also grew up in Las Vegas, to having an office on Nathan Road in Hong Kong and an office over my favorite bar in Carlsbad, California.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, it sounds like a total turn of events given what you were doing prior. You said this happened at 30 years old. Would you give context to the Brad in his early to mid 20s and kind of what led you to this point? I'd be curious to know what life was like for you in the prior decade.
Well, as I said, I have been offered to do a lot of things at a very young age, and so I was a senior in college at Arizona State, and was engaged to be married when I graduated, but I had arranged my entire second semester that I only went to class on Tuesdays and Thursdays and had Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays off because I only had electives left to take. And my older brother said, "Hey, my boss is coming through town. Why don't you meet him?" I said, "Oh, okay." And so I went to a resort in Phoenix, Arizona, and we took a walk around the resort and talked about a lot of things. And by the time the day ended, we had had a drink at every bar on the property. And he offered to make me the youngest salesperson ever hired by his company. And so instead of having Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays off, I started working as an independent sales agent for a company called Jostens. They make high school rings and yearbooks and that sort of stuff. And so I went to sales training school at the age of 21, was the youngest person ever to be there, and began my journey.
So just to make sure I heard this correctly, this was your brother's company?
It was a company that my brother worked for.
Like some of your brother works for?
Yes, and it was and they were a Fortune 500 company on the New York Stock Exchange at the time, and so anyway, I ended up getting married right after being in college and having spent my last semester selling on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and going to class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and kind of hit the ground running.
So on this note, was the drinking tour every bar? Was that the refute tour for you to?
Yes, it was. It was his way of interviewing people. It was something that I took into my business career. Is whenever I had to have a tough talk with an employer, whatever, I would say, let's take a walk. Let's just take a walk, and instead of setting up a power dynamic sitting in my office or whatever, we'd go and take a walk, or we'd go to lunch, or we'd go to breakfast, or we'd do something, and to just kind of put it on a personal basis, and that also lets people let their guard down. So I was hired that way, and tended to hire people and also manage people that way myself. To kind of finish the story, I was a very successful salesperson, but most successful salespeople need to put blinders on and just concentrate on sales. Well, I was a little bit interested in the legal part of it, and I was a little bit interested in the manufacturing part of it, and so again, at a young age, I was promoted into management. And it was just at a time when Jostens embarked on a total quality initiative, which was the precursor to Six Sigma and Lean, which would be the terminology today. And at the time, it was called total quality. And so Jostens pretty much sent me to every quality management by wandering around, participative management, statistical process control, qualitative analysis courses available in the country. And I went out on the road and preached the quality gospel to salespeople and to plants all over the country.
Wow.
Again, in my mid-20s.
Wow. And so you were learning, it sounds like, in some incredible sales skills, communication skills, how that kind of be, you said, kind of independent kind of sales for a company. I'm just curious, like, was sales a pathway that you had thought about prior in college?
I was a pretty serious business student, and I never really saw myself as a salesperson. However, my father was a salesperson who ended up owning his own business. My brother was a salesperson who then took those skills into other management issues. My younger brother was a salesperson, so I did see sales as a way to kind of quench my thirst for all aspects of business. Because as I said, we were independent salespeople, and got to control our own pricing. We got a net price, kind of like an insurance broker does, or a real estate person. But the products that we were selling to schools.
Totally. And so it sounds like a very hands-on education. You had some control, or some things you couldn't control, like what you were selling, but maybe control over how you kind of built margins in. When you look at this like period in kind of a pure kind of sales role, and you kind of look back, you're a serious business student in college. What do you think were some of the maybe takeaways when you look back at that experience were pretty non-obvious to you? That beyond just a good sales role gives you, but like, what were some things that you took away maybe then that you still apply or kind of carry with you to this day?
Well, some things are a little simplistic, but they are important. For example, one of my first days in being in sales is I was with an old salesperson, and his office was a mess, an absolute mess. And I kind of made a comment and said, hey, have you looked at any of these books or looked at any of these stuff? He goes, no, I haven't looked at any of it. He goes, yeah, I know my office is a mess. He goes, and my competitor across town, his office probably is pretty clean. I said, but I figured I could either stay in my office and get organized, or I could sell something. And I've always chosen just to sell something. And so as I went through my business career, I would always kind of look at, okay, what did I do to make any money today? And being an independent salesperson and then being an entrepreneur later, and, you could sit in a lot of meetings, you can shuffle a lot of paper and you can look busy if you want to. But what did you do to make any money today? What did you do to kind of push the business forward or help or enable somebody else to have success? When I had my office in Hong Kong, my partner in Hong Kong had a sign on his wall that said, if you're not having fun and you're not making money, what are you doing here? We're supposed to be making money and we're supposed to be having a little bit of fun while we do.
I mean, so it sounds like money was a motivator for you. At least you were tuning into
money, sales. Yeah, I mean, you were judged on sales. You were compensated on sales, right. and there's no way to deliver a bottom line unless you deliver a top line.
I think that's it's very simple, but that's very good. So I mean, you sound like though the principle of what were you doing to be productive to contribute to the top line was built in.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Mid-20s, but maybe, and we will get here, but in like the 30s, maybe it was like the business education and focusing on the bottom line, right? So you understood top line, but
yes, but and the bottom line, like I say, you can't deliver the bottom line until you deliver the top line.
Correct.
And then once you start running a company, I always said, throwing bodies at the problem is easy because everybody always wants you to hire more people. Throwing bodies at it. But every time you hire a new body, that just means that you need to sell more or cut more costs, but you just added the cost to deliver bottom line. So how about everybody works a little harder and does a job and a half and shares in the profits?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot. And definitely some profit sharing things we can talk about.
Oh yeah, no, and as we go a little further, all my companies had profit sharing involved in it, and that's one of the things I'm most proud of is that I had hundreds of employees who retired with over $1 million in their 401ks.
So I want to come back to this for sure.
Sure.
I just also want to kind of sound like the 20s was very formative. Now, I kind of want to even predate this even further.
Sure.
Growing up, you and your brother, and maybe you had more siblings, were there conversations at the household growing up around money and business, or was that education foreign and you had to get on your own?
No, and that's, if you have an entrepreneurial family, like my father was a salesperson who then ended up, owning a business. When you grow up in that situation, you're around business talk and you're around, the idea of taking risks and the idea of being entrepreneurial is not strange. Having interviewed a lot of people in my lifetime, a question I always would like to ask, and I'm glad if somebody volunteers it, but I don't even think it's legal to ask, but just to find out what their parents did. If you're asking for a person to be a salesperson and they've never sold before and their parents were school teachers, that's a hard leap to jump into. Okay, my parents had safety and security and had a union and a pension and all of these things. And now I'm asking this person to be entrepreneurial. And if you've never been around it, the comfort level is a hard thing to get to. It's not impossible, but it is something you have to go outside to find because you don't hear it. Many times, like in my wife and I have now been married for, let me think, it'll be 44 years this year.
Wow.
But she did not come from an entrepreneurial family. And so she her risk tolerance and my risk tolerance are completely different. But it is something that can be learned. And now her risk tolerance is probably much higher than mine is.
Really?
And her entrepreneurial thoughts are probably much more than mine is. But it's something that if you're not around it, you don't even know what questions to ask, or what situation or how to read a room sometimes.
That's interesting. I've been listening to. So we're going to talk about the third businesses. We'll get there, but we'll jump ahead to on this note. I've been listening to a lot of content around partnership and this. Not that I'm not there yet, but maybe one day. But thinking about having a partner at the time, you got married in your early 20s, right? So sales and eventually entrepreneurship, you were exposed, she wasn't. But I'd be super curious to know about how the relationship evolved to a point where you said now her risk tolerance has gained so much. Like, what enabled her through exposure, or what enabled her to be able to grow that tolerance and then it sounds like see it for herself on entrepreneurial endeavors in which she wants to pursue? Like, what's allowed for that to happen?
And so there's a comfortability that when you start talking about numbers, some people are used to talking about small numbers, but when you start hearing people talk about bigger numbers, at first you're very uncomfortable with it. After, as I said, when I was 30 years old and I got hired to run this company, all of a sudden I'm flying to Hong Kong, with one of my mentors, the guy who owned the company, and he is throwing around all these deals and whatever, and I was very uncomfortable with it. But as I kept going, I became much more comfortable with it. Same thing with my wife in our partnership. As we have been together for this many years, she has starts to see the patterns that I see, but also starts to see her own patterns and see her and really being entrepreneurial, I always say is the ability to see unlike data points and create a pattern, which really is what big data is. Unassociated data points that then can be grouped into you can notice a pattern in.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, I'm glad through exposure and through the data points of conversations and seeing kind of, your journey, it sounds like she's been able to build hers. And
well, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me, let's go back to, now that we understand some backstory here to the life of Brad, pre running the bow business.
Yeah.
Why did you take the opportunity to take the leap and build this business? Like, what,
as I said, I was in corporate America, and there were two things. One, I discovered very quickly that being entrepreneurial and being willing to ask questions sometimes does not fit that well in corporate America. I would be the person in a room that would ask a question and the room would go silent. After the meeting, people would come up and be, "Oh, that was really brave of you, Brad. We always wanted to know that, but you stepped up and asked it." I said, "Guys, I don't need any more parking lot support. If you would join me, and ask the question, maybe we can solve some of these things. But, so I was not the best corporate citizen because I was interested in too many things. And also, just kind of a basic thing, the company that I was working for was headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I grew up in San Diego and Las Vegas and went to college in Arizona. And moving to Minneapolis, Minnesota was going to be a hard sell to my wife and also to myself. I thought I could do it, and I couldn't. And so I was looking for opportunities here in San Diego, and this opportunity presented itself.
So one, how you got here, or kind of the conclusion for why you picked the decision, made sense.
Sure.
But it sounds like for those 20s, you were really focused on top line. You were focused on growing top line, learning those skills.
Sure.
You there hesitation? Like, what made you think I could go from this to saying, oh, by the way, yeah, I can now run this business?
Well, as I said, I was a pretty serious business student, so I understood the accounting. I understood the finance. I had an educational background in it. Also, when I went through the total quality thing, I got a whole education in how to manage people, and also, and as I said, a lot of statistical process control, a lot of, which is what the quality initiatives are all about. And so I had a wide range of financial knowledge that most people who were just in sales didn't have. And so I was very comfortable saying, yeah, I can run a business. I know how to manage people. I know accounting, and I know sales.
Well, it's, look, I think the fact that you had the background, right?
Yeah. And I would say Justin's pretty much, I never got later in life, I got a master's degree in executive leadership. But at that point in time, I did not get a formal MBA. But by sending me to all those courses, Justin's paid for my MBA. It was unofficial, but I got to go to the Crosby College, and I got to study Deming and Duran, and I got to do all that stuff.
Well, sounds like it was super pivotal for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. And one of the key things that helped me through my 30s and later in life was I learned very early through all of that is that my role as a leader and as a manager was not to set up hurdles for people to jump over. My job was to get the hurdles out of the way and let people work.
I think it's, from a startup to a company that matures, it's like a startup, there's stacked hurdles. And then as a company matures, maybe the roads are a little easier. But it sounds like your leadership development also blossomed. I mean, I would love to understand. So when you took over and kind of started leading the boat company, where was the company, or was it like just?
Oh, it was. It was a small family-run company, and the first job I was given, he told me, "Hey, that woman who's kind of acting as the office manager." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "That's my ex-wife. I want you to fire her." I went, "Oh, okay." Okay. And so I didn't fire her right away because she actually was very good at what she did. Actually, we worked together for a couple of years. And then I never really fired her. I counseled her out of the business.
Like an eloquent way to do it. Wow. Very cool. And so, all right, give us a timeline of like when you stepped in, very small, to like,
yeah,
the trajectory of that business, and then some maybe pivotal learning lessons that like you learned along the way and that maybe set you up for the next thing.
One of the, and again, it's something that I was taught and then something I've implemented. If you don't like the game, change the game. And so in that bow company, we pretty much were buying product from China and reselling it. But we weren't really adding any value. And so what I kind of changed our company into, and the company is still going on today, their product mix has changed a little bit and how they go to business has changed, but is that why don't we design products ourselves, when we do sampling, let's do complete samples, Let's do planograms and come with added value to the customer. So all they have to do is say yes, and bring a completely fully designed product. And so we kind of transformed to just being a reactive manufacturer into adding value and becoming a designer of products and acting as the gear between a manufacturer and the end user.
Wow.
And the reseller.
This is like you like completely transform the business.
Yeah, a little bit. Like I said, and that's, later on in kind of the company I had the most success in, which was a construction distribution company. We were wholesalers. But I've always said, if you don't add value to the chain, it's going to be easy for people to step around you. Because everybody always wants to cut the middleman out. But there's a reason why middlemen and importers and those sorts of things exist, especially if they add value. You have to add value to the chain. And if you get pigeonholed into not adding value, you have to somehow find a way that you can add value. And whether that's actual or whether that's just perceived, but you still need to add value.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I'm fully aligned with kind of, I think any job you do, kind of thinking about your role is value additive. That's why you're there. How you do that is, and how that contributes to top line, bottom line, all the things.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. You got to add value. And as I said, you can shuffle papers a lot and look very busy, but what did you do to make any money today?
For sure. You mentioned to me, Brad, about leadership, you talked about very visually moving hurdles, getting hurdles out of the way for people versus setting up hurdles. Can you expand a bit more about that and kind of give some of your leadership principles around kind of making that possible for others?
There used to be a term that was very popular in the 80s. You don't hear it that much anymore. But it was called management by wandering around. In the fact that everybody, when they get promoted or they become, get a job of, they have a tendency to get what I call the three-piece suit syndrome. They put on a three-piece suit, they start dressing nicer, they start thinking they're smarter, and they don't realize that what got them there is usually their people skills, and what is going to get them to the next level, what are the people who work for them. And so if you keep setting up hurdles such as mandatory meetings and mandatory this and whatever, you're not allowing your people to work, and you want them to be working instead of reporting to you all the time, just so that you can feel more important. And so we had very few meetings, but I was, and my desk wasn't very well used because I would be wandering around, talking to people, finding out what's going on, getting close to the customer, getting close to the people who are actually doing the work and finding out where the pain points were, and then helping them eliminate those pain points. And really, and they would do it themselves because they knew where the pain points were.
It seems like a very intentional approach. Obviously, you got to know kind of the company strategy and vision and kind of understand where it's going, but also understand the people that are working with you and for you, and kind of how much does it go into not just the principle of clearing the hurdles, right, for people, but also understand the dynamics of kind of each person, and then what makes the hurdles easier for them, and how do you apply that on a more systematic or micro level, per an individual as you're ultimately leading a company? What did you find that was super effective for you?
Well, later in my career, I found that open book management was a very useful tool, where letting people see how the company made money, and letting people see how much money the company was making, and creating individual profit and loss statements for each department and each individual, so that they could see, what they did, how what they did affected the bottom line, and also affected our ability to pay them. You know, especially in medium and small businesses, it's you're a part of these people's lives, and but they sometimes think that there's some money tree out there that that you just go shake and money falls off, and they don't. They need to be taught that no, the way money gets here is by what you do individually. Did you, every product that you dropped and broke, that comes right off the bottom line. Every extra piece of paper that you use, adds to expense. Every time you say, well, we need more people, I say, okay, well, we can hire more people, but that means we're going to have to make this amount of more money to pay for them. And what would you think if we just paid you more money to do it? Or you shared in the profits by not hiring that person, and so that everybody at this company has a job and a half, instead of some CEO getting excited about their full-time employee count. It's always funny to me how people pat themselves on the back for how many FTEs they manage. And it's like, the whole idea here, this is about making people productive, not how many people are working for you.
Do you think that, I'd love to dive into this a bit more on profit sharing as well.
Sure.
So it sounds like, I'm getting a grip on kind of, at least as you're laying the field, defining the field here, it seems like regardless of the type of business, like the sales flow, you understood, you bought into certain leadership principles and behaviors that ultimately impacted how you showed up for your people and people showed up for you. But then you also understood, all right, this is the management fundamentals of running a business. And then, all right, what's it going to take for a business to operate effectively at the bottom line? So my question for you then, all right, so profit sharing sounds like has been a big lever for you throughout. How do you think about implementing? How do you think about implementing in the conversation with the company around profit sharing and then motivating employees around that goal? What's that look like? How do you find to do that effectively in your businesses?
First of all, these days, a lot of it is determined by the tax code, and really it is being able to pay into employees' 401k programs and creating those pools of money so that you can do that, and again, teaching the financial intelligence to your employees so that they can see how they can contribute to that. But there used to be things called defined profit sharing programs, in which a certain amount of profit at the company would go into a pool, and then that pool would then be paid out to the employees as bonuses. The company I sold my business to, they have a very good model in that they pretty much set up their individual branches of their companies as profit centers, and they act as the bank and say, okay, here's how much money we spent on your inventory. Here's how much money we spent on your accounts receivable management. Here's how much we spent on your back office. On the profits, we're going to split it 60-40. 40% of the net profits is going to come to us. 60% is going to stay at the branch, and you guys divvy it up among yourselves as bonuses. And it's just a defined program, and it is very motivating. When, most people very rarely get big checks. Now, I know in the tech world, people talk about their bonuses and their sign-on bonuses and all that stuff. That's a different world. But 90% of the businesses in the United States are small to medium-sized businesses, and it's getting a lump sum of money enables you to have a lot of power. And my companies, we were lucky enough that we were able to do that, most years. For a while, we used to say every year, but the global financial crisis and the 9/11 issues and other things that happened, over the years, didn't allow you to do that. COVID, whatever. But it is nice to be able to string together a string of years where you have been able to contribute fully to 401k programs, and also, by matching what your employee puts in, and also pay lump sum bonuses based on a formula. There's a excellent book popular in the 90s, Open Book Management. It's about Jack Stack and what he did at the Springfield remanufacturing facility, and it really does talk about teaching financial literacy to your employees so that they understand how they make individually money for the company, and that allows for their success.
If you're a founder looking to grow without raising capital or giving up control, Relent is built for you. Founded by entrepreneurs who've scaled without outside funding, Relent helps companies find and retain talent, lower operational costs, and reinvest in growth. We've hired nearly 10 team members through Relent and streamlined our entire cost structure, freeing up capital to put toward what matters most. Even small teams can set up offshore operations quickly, compliantly, and without heavy infrastructure. With deep expertise in the India-US corridor, Relent combines cultural fluency with operational rigor and guides everything from team design to long-term scaling. Grow on your terms and start with Relent. To learn more, visit relent.team/arcbound.
And it sounds like you taught though your employees as well, like how they contributed to that bottom line.
I did. Yeah.
There was an expression, the former EO president of San Francisco, I remember he had an expression. He said, grow the tree, share the fruit. And very similar thinking, everything you're saying, and helping people see that. So yeah.
Yeah, a line I heard is, you make money in parallel with other people.
So part of this is you paying out employees in a way that's very motivating. Part of it also has to come down to the way the business was structured. Businesses are structured for repeatability, scalability, having the ability to actually grow because of the fundamentals of the business. So my question to you is, when you look at businesses that run and operate, the boat business, and even involved in other businesses, what kind of businesses do you look at to say, hey, these are businesses worth operating, building, scaling, so that, profit sharing could exist, and, the things that how they do exist. So to kind of understand kind of the current.
Kind of the industries that I was drawn to and that I was in, there was an existing need and an existing, schools already bought rings and bought yearbooks and bought caps and gowns. There's an existing need, and they did it every year. Hallmark and American Greetings were designed to sell ribbons and bows and packaging items and whatever. There was a need. And then we're in the plumbing distribution business, providing plumbing supplies, and they haven't found a way to build a building without plumbing yet. And so there was an existing need, and so I always found it hard when the entire world was your customer. But if you can find channels where there's an existing need, an existing product, and now the only challenge is to be better than your competitor, because they're going to buy it from somebody. Now I have a chance.
So just to clarify, it's entering businesses where the product was already in place.
The product is already replaced, and now building, for most success, and even in the tech world, most successful companies were not the originator. They were the ones who did it better. Even the great innovators, Apple stole a lot of their ideas from HP and Xerox, who didn't do anything with them. So they didn't originate the idea. Ideas are hard to come up with, but they made it better, and they did a better job at it, and took it to different heights, and so, like I said, like in the plumbing industry, buildings are going to get built, houses are going to get built, things are going to get built, and plumbing is 1,000 little bitty pieces. It's never going to, wholesalers are never going to be replaced by manufacturers, because no manufacturer wants to ship thousands of little bitty pieces. They want to ship in truckloads to some place that can then sell one at a time. And so for me, those are the types of businesses that always attracted me, that I could see as scalable.
Yeah.
And also can last for a long time.
For sure.
Yeah. And some of those are, it's not sexy, but they're old line businesses and things that aren't going to go away. And I think there's a real opportunity these days in those kind of old line businesses to reinvent, and similar to how Lyft and Uber reinvented the taxi cab business.
Now Waymo's is going to eat their lunch.
Now, I hope they do. I think that's a great idea. It would be nice to have fewer cars on the road and just have cars that don't run into each other.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, I see them in San Francisco. Like, feels like 20% of the cars they're driving around, it's a Waymo party.
Yeah.
So, yes. So, I mean, I love what you're saying about where there's a need in people that need it. Yeah. Product in place. All right. And we're going to, I'm going to come and I'm going to optimize it, efficiency, leadership, and the fundamentals of building business.
Yeah.
So, maybe you're not maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're not the 0 to 1 guy, but you are the 1 to 50 guy. I'm speaking it.
But as things that I've learned throughout my career is, most businesses don't go bankrupt for lack of sales. They go business for not having the capital behind them to sustain those sales. And everybody talks about grow. But that only works if you have enough money to do that. And there's a formula that banks use that doesn't get popularized very much, but there's a formula called the sustainable growth rate formula, which takes a look at your capital assets, your credit lines, all that stuff. And they come up with a formula and say, you can really only grow at this percentage comfortably. If you grow faster than that, us as a bank, we have a problem, because you're going to have a hard time paying us back.
Well, I mean, in this world of, just to add to the narrative, I think we've saw during the ZIRP era and kind of when money was much freer and interest rates were super low. I mean, I think people have seen a lot of business built on faulty fundamentals, and it's many are paying the price for it.
Yeah. And, I always say I'm an operator. I'm a profit and loss guy. When I get around to my friends who run public companies, I understand they're trying to create shareholder value, and they're trying to and it's all about the shareholder and whatever. But still, at the end of the day, you got to make money, because if you're sustaining losses, somebody's holding those losses. either your investors or a bank are holding those losses. And as the years go on, if you are losing money every year, at some point in time, you got to make some money. You got to make a profit, or else it's not sustainable. Because somebody's going to get tired of holding the losses.
For sure. Yeah. It's dead weight.
Yeah. I'm a P&L guy. You buy something, you sell something, the difference between the two you get to keep.
Well, I mean, this has been amazing. I mean, just the wisdom across, like, this is like an operations masterclass. Like,
I don't know about that.
Wait, where's your book, Brad? So Brad, one more, like, I'd love to know, like, right now, like, where you are in life. I mean, you sound like, you've done it all, seen it all to a degree.
Yeah.
What are you thinking about right now? Like, what's interesting to you? Where are you spending time? What's motivating you? I'd love to understand where you are.
I was very lucky in life that I had a lot of very good mentors that helped me along the way. And the mentors appeared to me kind of, out of the blue, when I needed them. And so I do a lot of mentoring where I just kind of try to pass it on. And as I joke all the time, I say I'm the gray-haired guy in the room that goes, well, don't do that. I tried that. That doesn't work. But sometimes that's what not even just new entrepreneurs, but people who've been running businesses for a while just need to have somebody who puts a mirror up and lets them see through the fog and help them along the way. So I do a lot of mentoring. However, I am worried. I grew up in business in an era of win-win strategies and letting people save face and helping, and helping others grow, because, if they're successful, you're going to be successful. William Urey's book from the Harvard Negotiating Project, Negotiating to Yes, In Search of Excellence by Tom Peters, those types of things where, I think in Tom Peters' books, he says something about, I went out, looking for what the keys to excellence in business were, and I found out that they were caring about people and love. And I do worry in our current climate that there aren't enough people talking about lifting everyone up and looking more at win-lose type strategies, or pounding their chest about how great they are. And that's not only our politicians. There's a lot of business people who do it too. Who want to somehow make sure how much money they have, or what car they drive, et cetera. And at the end of the day, who cares? I always like what my father said one time, is that success is what your children say about you to their friends.
For sure.
Yeah. And also, another thing my dad always used to say is, the minute you define yourself by power and money, your morals just went right out the window, because somebody's always going to have more.
And it seems like you just built yourself on a giving mindset, like, an abundance, give first, but also like do things the right way.
And that's, there are people who go around the country and they teach, pay yourself first. You'll hear that every once in a while, that you should pay yourself first. If you're running a business correctly, you're way down the line. You got to pay your employees. You got to pay your vendors. You got to pay the bank. You got to pay the IRS. You got to pay the healthcare. As the owner, you're way down the line. But if you do it correctly, it's all going to be fine.
This has been, Brad, I mean, so insightful. I mean, it's you said you can help people see through the fog. It's very clear, right, that we only saw the tip of the iceberg today. So I appreciate the wisdom, and I appreciate the lessons, and just like the incredible abundance of just life experience you went out.
Brian, thank you very much for reaching out. I appreciate it. And if I can do anything for you, just let me know.
Right. Where can people find you, Brad?
Actually, find me on LinkedIn. Bradley Shoen on LinkedIn. That's the best place to find me.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to staying in touch and following the journey ahead.
All right. Thank you. Good to see you.
I hope you enjoyed this wide-ranging conversation with Brad Shoen, a true operator whose clarity, candor, and generosity make him the kind of leader you want in your corner. From the art of asking uncomfortable questions to building companies that last, Brad's story reminds us that long-term success often comes from choosing substance over flash and people over ego. If Brad's insights resonated with you, go ahead and connect with him on LinkedIn at Bradley Shoen. Thanks for listening. See you next time on The One Away Show.